Alright, well that was not a typo in the title. This is a 10,000 mile review of this 2021 Yamaha MT09. Had it about 5 months now, got it back in May. And I put about 10,400 something miles on it in that time. I'm not a commuter, I work from home, so those have been all some fairly hooliganistic miles, I guess you could say. They've all been twisty roads, power wheelies. It's been a very overall hooligan machine, which is why this bike exists. Basically, this is a very fun bike to ride. It's a very good street bike. And we are out here today on the pig trail in northwest Arkansas to go over some stuff that I like about this bike. 10,000 miles in 5 months, not commuting. That should tell you all you need to know right there. I love this bike. This is such a good bike. It's got such a good engine in it. It feels really balanced. It's such a good experience. I haven't touched the suspension. It's adjustable. You have dual adjustments there in each fork. Haven't messed with it. Haven't messed with the shock. Everything's stock on this bike. If you're just riding 6-7 tenths, you're not going to need to adjust any of that. I'm about 200 pounds, 5'11". It's perfect. Nothing wrong with it. Love the engine. That's just a good sound. That's a good sound. And it's stock. It's a really good sound for stock exhaust. I did end up ordering a Yoshirima AT2 full exhaust 2 days ago because it needs to be a little deeper. Honestly, the volume's not bad how it is stock. I just want it to be a little bit deeper, maybe a little louder. I think it sounds good the way it is. It sounds more exotic the way it is than with an aftermarket exhaust. And I think the reason part of the reason it sounds so good is the exhaust dumps out of this bike towards the ground, and so I'm guessing it just reverberates back up off the asphalt and comes right back into your ears, which is why it sounds so good. And it sounds good, stock. Don't get me wrong. I just want a little bit more. So we're gonna try that Yoshi pipe out, see how it goes. Might be too much. Might have to take it back off. Don't know yet. Don't really want to make my neighbors angry because I ride this bike a lot. All right, now we're really starting to get in the pig trail here. I'm not gonna push this thing too hard because this is a public street. Also, it says fresh oil, so that's interesting. So I'm not going to push it too hard. I'm just going to show a little bit off of what this thing can do. You can definitely not reach the limits of this bike on the public streets. There's no way, unless you're just completely breaking the law. But if you're doing that, you probably don't care that it's a public street, so that's fine. Or it's not fine, but you know, people do their own thing. I can't tell them what to do. This bike has about 117 horsepower for the 2021 model year. I think 68 pound-feet of torque, something like that. And it is 889 cc's now compared to the previous model, which I believe was 849 cc's. Engine has the same physical dimensions. I think they did something inside. I think they gave it a couple more millimeters of stroke or something like that. So it bumped that 849 up to 889. I only rode the previous generation MT09 once. I did a test ride. So I don't have a great reference point for that bike compared to this one. But this bike is good. Like, this is a good bike. Honestly, I wouldn't want the MT10 over this because this thing's got so much power already that I don't know when you would use the power of the MT10 unless you're just doing a fat highway grip, which people do. So if you're that kind of rider, go for the MT10, I guess. But it is a naked bike still, so either of these are not going to be too much fun on the highway. Looks like we might have a nice little run out here on the pig trail today, dude. I haven't seen any cars or anything. What were we saying? I don't know, but let's talk about the quick shifter and down blipper, because I just used it twice there, the down blipper, and it works very good. Oh, I'll get to that corner. And the upshifter works very good as well. They're very satisfying to use when you're riding this thing a little harder. You can use them going around town at slow speeds. I will say the upshift isn't the smoothest sometimes at the lower RPMs. As long as you're accelerating and you're upshifting, not just like, well, I'm about to start cruising at this RPM, let me go up a gear, then it gets a little jerky if you do that. But if you're accelerating through it and you upshift and you're, say, going, I don't know, over 5,000 RPMs, it's probably going to be fine. But it also is very satisfying to use the clutch on this bike. The transmission is so good on this thing. It's very satisfying. Got a little dust on the road there. I don't know what that was. Tires on this bike are killer tires as well. It's got the Bridgestone S22 Battle Axe Hyper Sport tires on this thing. I've only gone through one front tire, replaced it at about 8,000 miles. The rear tire, I've gone through, I don't know, maybe 4. Most of those were due to nails. A lot of nails, a lot of construction around where I live. So a lot of nails have taken out some tires. I just actually replaced the rear tire last week from a bolt about that long. Stuck straight into the tire about 5 minutes from my house. So, you know, that's just part of the thing. A lot of flat tires up here. Little trike. Yeah, I don't have anyone in front of me. This is nice. We did just have Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue up here last weekend, I think, or the weekend before that. Well, it got canceled, but people still showed up. It was a very slow pig trail experience on that weekend, I'll tell you that. We weren't quite getting to the speed limit. Man, this engine though, holy cow. 10,000 miles in this thing still is like, it's just such, ugh. I can't even describe how good this engine is. It sounds good. The pops and crackles it makes when you downshift the quick shifter are just insane. It pulls from about, I don't know, 5 grand all the way up to 10, 11, wherever it redlines. It's so good. The only thing, when I first got this, I'm used to a big single cylinder thumper. I have a 650cc, I have a DR650. That thing's got torque from idle all the way up. I mean, this has torque too, but it's definitely got a power band. The DR650 doesn't have quite as noticeable of a power band as this bike. This bike, under about 5 grand, you give it the beans. You're like, oh yeah, this thing's got some torque. And then once it gets about 5 grand and starts climbing, it's like, oh yeah, this thing's got some torque. It definitely got a noticeable power band. It's nothing crazy, like a 600cc, where it's like 12 grand when the power comes on. But you can definitely tell it is there. It has a little bit of a wind up from a idle. See, I just went to the clutch instead of the quick shifter because it's also so satisfying. Everything about this experience on this bike is just, it's such a good bike. Like, if you're watching this bike on the fence, or you're watching this video on the fence, take it from me, I have 10,000 miles, 5 months, and I love this bike still. I have not found really anything bad about it. Oh, there's a truck up there. Let me give him a little room. That was a bad downshift. Okay, I will admit that. Only issue I've had at the 8,000 mile oil change interval, change the oil, change the filter, because that's when you're supposed to change the filter. You change like every other time. There was a little bit of metal in the oil. I took it down to the Yamaha dealership for like a warranty thing. They cut open the old oil filter I brought them and changed the oil again, and they couldn't find any metal, so hopefully it was just a fluke. Maybe just like, I don't know. But when this gets to the next oil change interval. Oh man, this bike's so good. When this gets to the next oil change interval, gonna definitely check pretty good for some metal, but I think it's just a fluke. It hasn't ran any different. It's never made any weird, strange sounds that it hasn't made before. And Yamaha seems like they're going to be pretty good about it. They said, we know that this had the metal issue, so if in the future something happens to the engine, we'll know about it, and so we'll probably cover it if it's related to something like what you brought it in for, because they couldn't find anything when I brought it in, so you can't really replicate metal in the oil if you don't know why there's metal in the oil. But this is it's a very good bike. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, because it's just how I feel. Like, you literally can't describe this bike. I love the little TFT display. Originally I thought that thing was going to be too small from pictures and stuff, but it's fine. Everything's very legible, very clear on it. The only thing I would change on it is right here. See, I got my coolant temp and I got my fuel gauge on there. You can only have 2 information. You can toggle through stuff. Here, let me get in a straightaway here. Open this wheel. So you can select this. You can toggle through all this stuff. Trip, meter, odometer. So there's my 10,500 miles. All that good stuff. You can toggle through it. You can't have your mileage on the screen at the same time if you have coolant and gas, which I want to have those up there. So I don't always know how many miles I'm putting on this thing, which I just like to know. It's interesting. It's not like it's going to blow up if I don't know how many miles are on it, but I would just like to have that information as well. And currently, you can't do that. If you do get the Yamaha heated grips for this, they do integrate with this, and the little bar down at the bottom here will show your heated grip level whenever you turn them on. So that's interesting. Haven't been able to find those. I was actually kind of looking into those. It looks like they're out of stock everywhere. Pretty much every Yamaha accessory for this bike looks like it's out of stock. I don't know if it's a supply chain COVID pandemic thing, or if it's just everyone's buying them. I have no idea. It's probably more towards the COVID pandemic deal. But overall, I really like the TFT. I have it set right now to colored on the tachometer, so right now I'm just cruising. It's about 4,000 RPMs. It's white. Get up in the green, that's the real power zone, and if you get it really high, it turns orange, which is like, hey, you're getting near a red line, so get ready to shift. It's also got a shift light. It's not as dramatic as I would like. Basically, you can set your shift light intervals too, to where the shift light will come on. And what it is it just, once you get up to like whatever you set your bottom of the shift light thing, the little gauge or the little gear select number will start flashing at you. And it's not, it doesn't really flash, it goes from black to this color. So it's not too dramatic. I would like maybe a yellow or something. So if I'm just kind of glancing at it, I'll know off just right like that. But if you're glancing at it while it's flashing and you catch it like this, you know, of course, I haven't redlined this bike in a while. When I was getting used to it and trying to, I guess, visually tell where redline was, I did redline it a time or two on accident. Another thing, the quick shifter doesn't seem to work at redline. I'm assuming it's because it's no longer accelerating, it's bouncing off a limiter. So if you try to quick shift at redline, it's not going to work. It's either going to bang into gear, which thankfully I haven't experienced, or you're just going to be doing this on the shifter, just kicking at it, and it's not going to do anything. And you gotta pull in the clutch and upshift. From my experience, I haven't done that in a while though. This is a good road too. I came out here because I was like, this bike handles great. I want to take it on a nice twisty road for this video. So here we are, Pig Trail, one of the top motorcycling roads, I guess. Honestly, Northwest Arkansas is the place for a bike like this. Not only the Pig Trail, but like any road you want to go down, it's gonna be nice and twisty, and usually paved fairly well. So I guess you probably saw that power wheelie coming out of that turn back wherever that was. This bike does do that. Does that a lot. Loves the power wheelie. First gear, if you give it, I don't know, half throttle. Of course, I'm in drive mode 1, which I'll mention that and go over those in a couple of minutes here. But if you give it half throttle in first gear, it's just going to come up. There's not really much around that unless you have lift control set to maximum. And even then, it will still probably come up. It just won't come up as quickly. That's what lift control seems to do. It will still lift the front wheel, but it just won't come up as fast. I have it set to 1 right now, which is the least obtrusive or intrusive other than having it completely off. And it will come up as fast as you want it to. I'll tell you that. It will definitely come up. It makes me a little scared to turn it off all the way, because who knows how fast it'll come. I just flip over completely. I have traction control set to, I think, 2. Just because I wanted to see if there was any difference. I can't really tell the difference. It doesn't really spin the tire all that much. But it has done it before if it's cold. But in normal situations, if you're completely upright in a straight line and you give it gas, it's probably not going to spin. Let's see. So go over the drive modes. There's 4 drive modes on this thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the most responsive. Like, we're in 1 right here, so look at my hand. It's instant, and that was not even in the power band. It's instant in 1. 2 is the roll-on's a little slower. It's a little slower there. 3 is even slower than that. Let me get around this corner here. Give you a 3. So here's 3. A little bit slower. And 4 is even slower than that, and it cuts the peak power down. So that's 4, and that was a lot of hand twist on that compared to what I did for the first number 1, where I barely touched it. I like to ride around a number 1. Nice little waterfall. I like to ride around a number 1. I just like to have that whenever I want it. A lot of people think it's too jerky. They usually do 2 or 3, which is fine. I used to ride it in 2 when I first got it. Actually, I was in 3 when I first got it and testing all the modes out. I like that they're there, but honestly, if I'm on this bike, I want to have a sporty experience, so I usually keep it in 1. And then you also have traction control modes, which you can swap to the traction control mode here. You gotta let off the throttle, hit the mode button, and you got your traction control, so you can change this. So whenever you do change any of these modes, you do have to be off the throttle or stopped completely. So let me get up here so I can get off the throttle. So I have it currently in manual mode, where I told you I had a lift control to 1, traction control to 2, and I have stability, or the slide control. I have that all the way up still. I don't really want to turn that off, because I have no reason to turn it off. If I'm in a corner and it starts sliding, why would I not want the computer to intervene and hopefully save that situation? Like, I don't know why you turn that off. I guess unless you're hooning around doing some skids or something. But so we got, I think it's 1, 2, 3 on this. Alright, it's not actually letting me change that, so maybe you do have to be stopped to mess with the traction control. But drive modes, you can be moving. And this thing is fast. Well, let me change that. It's not fast, it's quick. I think top speed on this is limited to like 130 something. But honestly, if you're doing over 80 for any period of time, you're gonna hate your life on this bike. It's not a good interstate bike for sure. The wind, it just wrecks you. It's not a fun time. I don't know if it'd make a difference if you had a little screen, a little windscreen or not. The Tracer 9 GT, if you want to do interstate, that's the bike. It's got the same engine. I think it's got the same frame. It's got a little longer wheelbase, swing arms wider, or not wider, it's longer. And it's got a big windshield. It's got like, I think it's got saddlebag stock. It's got heated grip stock. I think cruise control. Nice windscreen. That'd be the bike to get if you're going to do interstate. It's a little heavier. It's probably not as sporty, but if you're going to crush some interstate miles, that is the bike. This is a highway bike. 55 mile an hour speed limits. This is where this bike really comes alive here. This bike will get up to the speed limit faster than a lot of stuff, most stuff. I think, I don't know where I read this, I think it was Wikipedia or it may have been a review on, I don't remember honestly, and you might have to fact check me on this, but I think 60 to 100, this is faster than, or as fast as an R1. In third gear, it was something to do with the gear you're in, which makes sense because an R1's like first gear goes like 90 miles an hour, so third gear is gonna not be in the power band of an R1 at that speed. So let's do a little fourth gear, 50 mile an hour. Let's see. Yeah, there's a little power band. You can tell. It starts winding up. And when it starts turning, the tachometer turns green is where it really starts starting to pull. And that didn't even get into the peak of the power band. We were just at the very bottom of it, I would say. So let this truck get a little further away here. I'll see if I can give it a little more. Maybe a second gear. I don't know if that's a cop, but I'm not going to do that actually. That quick shifter is very smooth on this thing. Works very good. I haven't read too many other bikes with quick shifters, but from the reviews of this bike, a lot of people say this Yamaha quick shifter works a lot better than some other manufacturers. Like I think at one point they compared it to an Aprilia Tuono 660. I think they said it was better than that. And that's Italian, so that's supposed to be a scalpel of a bike, a race machine. That's not true, but that's the stigma or the stereotype of Italian bikes. They're very refined, very high tech, and for someone to say that this has better quick shifter, it's like, hey, that's nice. Speaking of the tech, I mentioned the slide control on this thing. So this bike has a 6-axis IMU derived from the R1. It's basically the same. It's smaller because, you know, technology evolves, things get smaller. And it's nice. This bike has some really good electronics. This has a really good electronic package. Speaking of packages, let's talk about the ergonomic package. So this bike has some of the tallest handlebar risers I've ever seen on a stock bike. They are literally that long right there. They look a little weird if you really eyeball them. They're very long. It puts the handlebars up in a nice position though. I'm not quite up straight, like straight up on my back. I'm a little forward. And I think that's probably better than being straight up, because if you're completely straight up, whenever you hit a bump, that bump is going to be transferred right to your spine. When you're forward, you have a little more, it's more of you bend down versus your spine compresses. So I think that was a good part, or a good idea, to not make this thing sit straight up. You can also adjust these handlebars from the factory. They have 2 positions you can adjust them to. This is the stock position. I think the other position puts them a little more tilted forwards, I believe. So if you want to be more aggressive, you might want a more forward position handlebar. You can also adjust the position of the foot pegs on this. You can make them a little higher, I want to say, get a little more ground clearance, have a little more sporty position. But if you're really doing all that to this bike, you really want to make it a much more sporty bike, I might just buy a sportier bike. I mean, it's nice to have the option, but I want to be comfortable and sporty. And I think right now, I don't want to bend my knees any more than I already am on this bike. The tank actually on this thing is pretty wide. I'm used to the dual sport I mentioned, DR650. It's got a little, like, barely any tank to grip onto. So when I first got on this thing, I felt like it was splitting my legs apart. Like, I had to do some stretches. I don't know if it's just this tank's extra wide, or that was my first experience with a wide tank. but I'm used to it now. But when I first got this thing, I'd ride it for like 2 hours, and then it felt like my hips were out of the socket. It was something. It's got a nice seat on it. It's firm. It's not too firm. It's nice and wide, so like you're not hanging off of the seat or anything anywhere. It probably could be a little softer if you're wanting to go for like an all-day ride. It can get a little hard after an hour or two. That's not really an all-day, so maybe like a 2-hour, 3-hour ride. It gets a little hard, but it's not bad. I can definitely I can suffer through it if it gets too bad, which it never has. And I'm coming from a dual sport, like I said, so the seat's about this wide, and it's like sitting on a 2x4. And I used to ride that thing all day. I still do ride that thing all day. So this seat's definitely not bad compared to what you can get on a motorcycle. I do like that you're not in this bike and you're not on this bike. The dual sport, you're on it, and like a super sport, you're in it. And you're kind of a combination on this bike. So you are under this tank. It does come up over you, over your legs there. But the seat is also, it doesn't feel like you're tucked into anything. Like the seat's nice and flat, basically, all the way out the back. And it feels really good. I like it. I don't have to be hunched over, tucked into anything. And I'm not like sitting way up here, like I feel like I'm just riding on top of it. I feel like I'm in it, but I'm not too far in it that I'm uncomfortable. Man, this thing's a good bike though. Holy cow. A lot of people have issues with the older models, 19 and before, or 2020 and before. Bad downshift, okay. Where they thought the throttling was too, or the fueling at slow speeds was too jerky. This does have a thing. It's not really an issue. I don't think it's an issue with fueling or anything. It's just the engine braking in first gear is a little severe. But getting on the throttle is not an issue. Just when you're cruising around in first gear and you're like going through town. This thing's actually very maneuverable. It's not to the same level as that dual sport. The headlock or the lock to lock on the forks isn't actually that much. It's almost difficult to make a U-turn sometimes on this thing. And I definitely caught myself having to put a foot down a lot in parking lots when I first got this thing, because it really doesn't turn, the head doesn't turn very much. I might pull over up here, because we're almost to the end here, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But if you're in a really tight, cramped spot and you're trying to maneuver, you might run out of lock to lock on this thing. Or if you're just trying to do a U-turn, you can run out of lock to lock. Alright, well, we're basically at the end of the good section of the big trail. Down here at the Hillbilly Hideout gas station. Truck stop, whatever you want to call it. I guess it's both. I'm going to go in there, show you this lock to lock on this thing. If you notice me keep spamming this turn signal button, I just have a bad habit of doing that. I don't want to be riding around with my turn signal on. Alright, got a Nissan truck. Let's go over here. Do a little turn. See, this is, I'll turn this full lock here. That's full lock on this thing. It's not much. Let me see if I can do it here. I mean, if you counter body lean and all that. Actually, I want to get gas. I don't know what I'm doing. It doesn't say I need gas, but I probably do. I'll explain that too. So the way this gas gauge works, it's kind of misleading. It's got four, oh, I forgot it goes off. So it's got 4 bars. I thought this was just visually bigger. This actually represents half a tank, from what I can tell. and then you use the half tank, and then you have half a tank left, but the last half is split into 3 pieces, which is a little weird. And it gets you into some interesting situations with gas. Alright. So that was then, like, I don't know if you can tell, but that was barely any throttle on that, and we got up to speed pretty quick. So, like I was talking about the fuel, that was about, I didn't even show that I was at the half tank part, and I put about a gallon, in, like 1.2 gallons in this thing. So, I don't know, I would like it better if it was split into 4 sections versus the half tank and then the 3 parts of the other half tank. I just want 4 equal sized sections. But I mean, now that I know that it's like that, it's not that bad. Just when I first got it, I would be like, this first part of this fuel thing lasts a long time, and once you go past that, it goes down quick. So you don't want to get caught out in the middle of nowhere thinking that, oh yeah, since that took so long to go down, this next little bar is going to take that long too, because it doesn't. It comes down a little faster. There I go, hitting that button again, trying to turn on my turn signals that aren't even on. So they had some traffic I got caught up in. There is a car in front of me. I don't know how far he is now. I'm not trying to ride up behind him. I don't actually see him. Maybe he's whatever he turned off there. No. I guess he just went around. Okay, well, I don't know where he is. I was gonna give him some space, but he's just disappeared, so maybe I gave him a lot of space. Going back the same way, or not the same way, well I guess going the opposite direction now, going back on the big trail. I'm gonna stop at the overlook and get some footage of this thing. Such a good bike. It handles so well. I know a lot of people said the last gen didn't handle very well. Or it had this thing where when it was on the side, it wanted to stand back up, and you had to kind of fight it. This thing just does whatever you tell it to. If it doesn't fight anything, it's just very good. And I think the way they did that, they moved where the head mounts, the headstock, whatever it's called, they moved it down like a minuscule amount, but apparently that makes it more planted in the front. A lot of people said the front of these things was very iffy feeling on a corner, or the old models, I'll say. So I guess that fixed the problem, because it handles perfectly for what I need it for. But again, I've never taken this bike to a track. I don't really plan on taking it to a track. You could have a fun time at a track with it. It's not gonna. I mean, it's still it's a very fast, sporty bike. It's not an R1. It's not a track weapon, but it's definitely gonna be fun. You're not gonna take it to a track and be disappointed, I'll say. Unless you're one of those guys that just is only looking for times. It's very capable, for sure. Do a little brake test here behind me. Let's see. Oh yeah, she stopped. She stops fast. Didn't even engage ABS on that, so I might have been able to brake a little harder. I think I've engaged ABS on this once or twice, and it was on the rear wheel. It's because I did a bad downshift. Didn't quite give it enough. Slipper clutch didn't help it. Well, I guess it did help, but I was also braking at the same time. The rear coming to a stop sign, so I was going like 5 miles an hour. So if I was moving faster than that, it wouldn't have had to do. It wouldn't have had anything. It wouldn't have a problem. Alright, so we got a car in front of us, but we're just gonna chill. This thing cruises pretty well too. Love signs like that. Well, I'm just gotta get a little further ahead so we can get around this next corner. Pretty good. I don't think he is slowing down more than I wanted him to. Oh well. Yeah, this is not jerky at all in the low RPMs. Like, I just did that and it didn't do any jerkiness, didn't do anything weird. So I think the fueling, I never personally experienced it on that little test ride I did have on a 19 or 18 MT09. I didn't really notice it anyways. But this bike definitely doesn't have anything noticeable with weird jerky throttling on and off issues. Other than the engine braking in first gear is a little much, but you can't really do much about that. A little quick shifter. So that was probably as slow as I'd be accelerating and using the quick shifter at the same time. Downshifting you can do whenever, basically, but upshifting, I feel like you really need to be giving it some beans, or else it'll kind of jerk. Which it's for that. It's not for just like cruising and shifting. Because like that's what you gotta clutch. Make it smooth if you're wanting to do smooth changes. It's a nice little twisty road. If you're in this area and you haven't been on the big trail, I would definitely recommend coming out here, checking it out, checking out some of the roads around here. I usually just kind of go all day and just ride around the roads out here, and usually find new roads every time, so definitely not a shortage of nice roads out here. Also, I wouldn't recommend quick shifting into first gear. That's a little rough as well. So I guess I always use the clutch to go to first gear. I like those little switchbacks, they're nice. Get some elevation. It's a nice little cruise on this bike. This thing will cruise. It's not all sport all the time. It definitely helps that you're not hunched over. Because I guess technically you could cruise on something like an RS6, but you're not going to have any fun. That's going to be a rough time. Also, if you have a dual sport, come check out the big trail, because there's off-roading trails all around the big trail. Like that right there, there's a camp there, like there's literally one of the trails right there. This camp up here, Mulberry Mountain. I think they have like off-road trails coming off of it as well. And then there's also just all the forest roads up here, which are dirt and fun, going up on top of mountains and stuff. Cloudy. Alright, I guess I'll just do some engine sound here. Not talking.
actually forgot to record an outro to this, but basically I'm 100% happy with this bike. There's not really anything I would change. Would 100% buy it again. If you're on the fence, I would go for it, unless you're wanting something like a Duke 890R for that little extra bit of handling, if you think you're going to be pushing it that much more. But I would definitely recommend this bike. Sweet bike. Yamaha hit it out of the park with this thing, and I could not be happier with this thing.